Hey everybody, welcome back to the Cabral Concept. So good to be here with you today. Exciting guest for all of us to be able to learn from and enjoy. This is JJ Virgin. Thanks so much for coming on the Cabral Concept.
And thank you for having me. And by the way, well done on my podcast. We should.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, this was this was a lot of fun being able to connect with someone that I've known in this space for at least 10 years. You've got some great, I would say, not only amazing best-selling books, but a lot of training programs for women past 40, which we're going to be talking about here today. Where I like to start, though, and I think which is getting a little bit more maybe advanced or unique in our space, is talking about not just anti-aging, but actually living longer, stronger. So that, sure, we could keep people alive from 80 years old now to maybe 100 years old. But are they going to have full use of their faculties? Are they going to be able to move their bodies like they did 20, 30, 40 years ago? My belief is that they can, but they should start a little bit earlier in life in order to be able to keep those faculties and their strength and their muscle going for the next 20, 30 years. My opinion, what do you think about that?
We are, of course, totally in line. And I think of the story of my parents. And I'm adopted, so no genetics here at all. And watching the two of them as I was growing up, like two role models. One role model, my dad, smoked, drank, would literally ask me to bring him butter to put on the cookies, always had dessert, super stressed, on blood pressure medication, always kind of looked like he was going to blow up a bit, right? Red face, the whole bit. At 70, my last memory of him when he passed was in a hospital bed in my parents' bedroom, in adult diapers, having lost, 80 pounds, wasting away from cancer. Contrast that with my mom, who just passed away last year at 93, ate healthy, lived in a 2-story house, always up and down the stairs, did all of her own housework, all of her own stuff, golfed multiple times a week, walked, had a great support system, had a purpose in life, didn't smoke, drank very sparingly. Had a little dessert thing, I will say that, but didn't go crazy with it. She was definitely in everything in moderation, although I'm not completely bought into that statement. And, that just showed me that while aging is a privilege, aging powerfully is absolutely a choice. Mm-hmm. And I really like what Dr. Peter Attia talks about. He talks about this marginal decade. I want to shrink where you're kind of that 10 years of life where you're not really functioning that well. Well, my mom didn't have a marginal decade. She had about a marginal couple of months. Mm-hmm. That's what I would like. And when you look at that and you start to really look at what's going to determine that, it turns out that the single biggest thing that really dictates not just are you going to live or die, all-cause mortality, but really quality of life too, is your VO2 max. It's how much oxygen you can consume when you're doing all-out exercise effort. And right alongside that is how strong you are, like how many push-ups you can do and how well you can balance on one leg. All of these things that for an old exercise physiologist make me so happy. Because I was like, these are free to everybody. And at whatever age you are, yes, it's so much better to start this when you're younger. So it's like, if you start saving for retirement when you're young, way better. But that doesn't mean if you haven't started at 50, you don't start. You want to start at any age. And it turns out you can build muscle at any age. You can start building muscle at 90. The studies are there to show it now. So if you're listening going, oh, shoot, I forgot to work out, don't worry. You can start now and have huge, huge effects.
Yeah, let's go over a little bit of that because I had the privilege of working with Dr. Wayne Westcott in Boston, Massachusetts. I know, way back in the day. We're going back to the early 2000s right now. So he was doing some of the I would say the first research clinically on seniors in Quincy, Massachusetts. And he was showing that just 2 sets of an exercise, and he was just doing machine circuits, was able to stave off osteoporosis, build muscle, actually regenerate bone mass, which isn't supposed to be able to happen. So I'd love to hear from you some of the maybe newer science on this, why and how a 70, 80-year-old plus is able to put back on muscle or gain muscle, and what does that do for them in terms of not just lifespan as we spoke about, but health span? Let's talk more about that.
Yes. I mean, I think that's the most exciting thing that's coming out is that you can gain muscle at any age, which is going to directly impact your quality of life. And as you start to look at these metrics of just, quality of life and how many steps you take a day, quality of life and how many push-ups you can do. And so what I like to say is, we don't go to the gym or exercise to get better at exercising. We exercise so that we can get better at life. Mm-hmm. And when you think about what you want to be able to do in your 60s, in your 70s, in your 80s, in your 90s, you want to be able to run up a flight of stairs. You want to be able to catch yourself if you start to fall so you don't become that terrible statistic of fracturing a hip at 60 plus and being in the 1/3 who, die within the year, or the 50% who never fully come back to, where they were before. And so you think about all the things that we really want to be able to do in life, and exercise is the thing that sets you up. And what concerns me, I was reading an article and they were talking about aging your house. And I'm like, aging your house? What the heck is that? And aging your house meant moving from a 2 or 3 story to a single story. Mm-hmm. And starting to make things really easy to move, like higher toilets and things like that. And I thought, you know what? I know when I lived in Japan, I was living in a small city, not in Tokyo, and there weren't toilets, there were holes, and you would squat, Mm-hmm. And I go, if anything, as we age, we should have 3-story houses, we should have, holes instead of toilets, we should be getting people to move more, not less, because the less you do, the less you can do, and the more you do, the more you can do. So this really is a big message of whatever age you are, start or do more. This isn't the time to go, okay, I'm getting older, I should take it easy. This is the time to really go, now I'm going to start to push it more and do it safely, right? But the more you push yourself in a very trained environment like a gym, the less likely you're going to get hurt when you're out in the wild, right?
Yes. So what would be some, because I completely agree. I used to call it, people are training to get old. Like they all of a sudden, start to change their workout program. And instead of doing, back 20 years ago, we started calling it like functional based fitness, which would be maybe a one-legged Romanian deadlift or just moving unilaterally. So one side of the body, working together, working in unison, working on balance, proprioception. But then as people are getting older, say, oh, let's move back to being seated, open chain exercises on machines. So I can tell you don't agree with that. I don't agree with it. Maybe we're not doing heavy barbell deadlifts at 65, 70 years old with a history of back issues, but that doesn't mean we're not doing some type of deadlifts. We're not working the body with human natural movement. So what will be some examples that you do recommend for anyone of any age? What does a good workout program look like?
And here's the thing. I would argue, and my whole graduate work was in spinal biomechanics, because my parents were golfers, and I went, you know what, if I really go deep into spinal biomechanics, I will never be out of a job, right? Mm-hmm. Because they all have back problems. And my biggest takeaway, and I remember back then, the big train of thought, the school of thought was, if you have back problems, you should strengthen your abs and avoid your back. And I kept thinking, well, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. That'll make it worse. Right. If you strengthen your abdominal muscles, you reciprocally inhibit your back muscles, they'll get weaker, and you'll set yourself up to get even more hurt. So the first takeaway here is, this is the reason people probably think why I shouldn't do something, or why I wouldn't do that, is the reason why you should. So that's the first important thing. And again, doing it in a very controlled environment. I have a progression, and I've really been noodling on this, because it's, exercise prescription, especially done kind of in a group setting, is challenging, because everybody comes in with their history book of whatever injuries they have, whatever beliefs they have, all of that stuff comes into play. But there's some things that I think we can check off the list to build on, because when you're doing a fitness program, you really want to build on a great foundation. And to me, we've got to look at this in terms of activity, because when you think about metabolism, we have your resting metabolic rate, of which that's your age and your genetics and your sex. And the number one way you can change that resting metabolic rate is by adding more muscle. That's really the biggest way you can affect it. Then you have the thermic effect of food. And we talked about yesterday when you were on my podcast about eating protein and what protein will do. I think we did on thermic effect of food. So eating will do this. Protein is the most, then carbs, fat's negligible. And then the next piece of it is your activity. And I say activity because activity is both non-exercise activity and activity, right? And we've got to look at both of them. And if you're really not moving much, I think the starting point should always be that, move more. And I love the fact that we have trackers that make it so easy. Because remember the days of the pedometer?
Absolutely.
I remember the pedometer. So now we actually have these phones, and we have a ring that can track to the phone or a watch. It's awesome. So I always start with having just people do an activity audit. How much are you moving throughout the day? And could we stand instead of sit? Could we walk on a walking pad while doing, our calls? Could we be moving around the house more? And so the first thing is to do that audit and to work on getting those steps up to 8,000 to 12,000 a day. And it turns out the average person is getting 2,500 to 4,000 steps a day. That's
funny. We didn't talk about it, but I see the same thing in my practice. We tracked it to be around 3,700 steps per day. And I would say we probably have a little bit even more advanced audience. And that's what it is. So that's interesting to hear you say the same.
Yeah. And I mean, and those are people who are coming in who are concerned about their health,
That's
right? But if you're not thinking about it, if you're not aware about it, it's very easy to fall into this trap. Right? So again, the first thing you do is audit and go, oh, here's where I'm at. You get that 8,000 to 12,000 steps. Now, here's what's interesting. They did a study where they had a control group, and then they had two groups that were both told to do 12,000 steps a day. However, one of the groups was told on 3 of the days for 30 minutes to add some intensity. Now, I look at how to add intensity. I live in Florida. You live in Florida. Unless we're walking up and down bridges, there's no hills. So I got a rucking vest. Now we can add speed, we can add hills, we can add a rucking vest, which is a weighted vest. And so the one group added some intensity. They did it with some speed. They power walked. And what they found was both groups changed their LDL-C improved. But the group that added in the intensity actually lost waist circumference, improved their body composition, improved their HDL. So it was like just by same amount of steps. In fact, now it's in less amount of time because they added in some speed to get that kind of metabolic effect. There's cool research showing that if you lay the foundation before you do a resistance training with some of that, which would be effectively like zone 2 aerobic training, you will actually do better as you get started in the resistance training program. So that's the foundation. Step 1, audit, 8 to 12, add intensity.
And that's fantastic. I'd love to hear too, because we look at the same thing. I mean, if you're not moving your body, like that's a prerequisite. I think you're going to be less likely to get injured. You're going to start working on ankle mobility. You're just going to start to move the body, which is great. Tell me though, so resting metabolic rate, just for people kind of wondering there, it's how many calories we're essentially burning at rest per day. And the more calories we can burn, well, the more food we get to enjoy. That's, one part of it as well, hopefully healthier food. But the other part is, let's go over, because they did the same amount of walking, then they added intensity by putting on the weighted vest or the rucking vest. Do you think it's simply they burned more calories and that is why they saw a decrease in waist circumference? Do you think it did anything hormonally in the body? What do you think changed? Or again, was it just total calories burned?
Who knows? Because they didn't go into that. And so you look at it and go, I don't think it was enough to do any, and that's why the next step is going to be resistance training, to do anything where we're really starting to build muscle, but maybe we've gotten some improvement in insulin sensitivity. But again, we also burned more calories. So potentially all things being equal, if diet stayed the same isocaloric, everything was the same, but we added in some intensity that increased a caloric burn and maybe caused a little afterburn, that could have done it. So I think the most interesting piece of that is that, let's add some intensity in. It's easy enough to do. And I especially, when I look at this activity, I go, really try to get something in if you can after dinner. That's like always my goal. It helps prepare you for sleep, good for digestion. So we either do a sauna after dinner or we do a walk after dinner. We alternate between the two. I know you're a big sauna fan too.
Yes.
And then, get some intensity and to start pushing more into that breathy place, that zone 2 place. But again, I see that as foundation, and that's going to help also improve VO2 max. But this is really, to me, preparation for the main event, which is resistance training. And resistance training done in a very specific way once you've laid the foundation. When you look at what happens as we age and what's happening with aging muscle, there was just an article that came out in Nature magazine where they researched, they looked at 17 subjects, did biopsies of their intercostal muscles from age 20 to 75. They looked at these people. And what they found was that as we age, we're losing fast twitch muscle fibers, which we knew. And we have two main types of fibers, right? We have our slow twitch, which are endurance. They help us stay upright, postural. And then we have our fast twitch. That's our power, speed, moving heavy things, moving things fast. Those are the things we lose as we age. Those are the muscles fibers that tend to be build more, are easier to hypertrophy. And the next thing they found is that we had increased inflammation. We know that can block muscle protein synthesis. Maybe why fish oil they're discovering is anabolic. I'm just wondering if it's just pushing the anti-inflammatory pathway, and we're so messed up in our omega-6 to 3 pathways. They also found that we had trouble with our muscles and nerves communicating, that connection. That neural connection, that really is the first thing that starts to happen as we lift weights, is our muscles and nerves need to learn how to communicate well. And then we had decreased muscle regeneration. So one of the things that we know as we age, especially in our mitochondria, we're starting to have more breakdown, and we got to clean it out, regenerate it. And we do that way more slowly, which is going to make it harder for us to build muscle and have energy and all that, because we're getting clogged. So that means that we need to focus on really building fast twitch muscle. And I say this because what I see with people as they age is they start to focus on gentler, easier exercise. Mm-hmm. They focus on yoga and Pilates. And I think yoga, I just did yoga this morning. I think things that focus on balance and flexibility and isometrics are amazing as a part of a program. But if you focus on that and focus on walking without the speed element, you actually are going to make your body build more slow twitch. You'll lose more fast twitch, and you actually push yourselves more into an even worse situation of having more slow twitch fibers and going slower. So you got to add this piece in, this resistance training piece. And the way I like to start people is to first get your body going through the movements, again, to get the muscles and nerves communicating and making sure that you're working in good form, and to focus on movements that mimic activities of daily living so that you're training to get better at life. You can use, machines at the gym, and if you've got injuries, that can be a very great, safe place to start. It can build muscle. We know is the same as you could with free weights. But the reason I prefer body weight, free weights, suspension trainers, cables, and bands is because in life, we're not bolted to the floor, right? Mm-hmm. So we got to do things that are going to pull in our core and make us balance and put more stress on the nervous system and the bones. So I'll focus on things. Basically, I've divided the body into 4 parts. Number 1 is upper body pushing. So that would be things like a push-up or an overhead press or a dip. And I say those exercises specifically because an overhead press axial loads the spine, great for preventing osteoporosis, and very, putting things up in a cupboard, putting things up in the airplane, compartment. Like, it's very useful. And then you think of a dip as that's pushing yourself out of the sofa or out of a low car or off the toilet. Mm-hmm. And then a push-up, turns out there's some really good norms for equating push-ups with overall strength and all-cause mortality. So push-ups are super important, and that works your chest and your shoulders and your triceps. Then there's upper body pulling, and I am really gung-ho on pull-ups. Now, this is something you get a spot for, or you do an assisted pull-up at the gym, or you do a flexed arm hang, but it's a great way to create grip strength, which we know is a great proxy for overall strength. I also love bent over rows because that is very similar to picking groceries up off the floor, that type of thing. And then there's hip and thigh hinging. Again, that would be things like a squat. And if you've got knee and back injuries, I was 17 when I blew out my knee. And so I've had just a history of joint problems where I had to have a knee replacement, a hip replacement, and I broke my foot when I was in Japan. I know I broke my foot doing gymnastics in Japan. It was just ridiculous. So like broken foot, knee and hip. And, those would all be reasons why you wouldn't do these things. And they were the reasons why I did do these things and literally was able to put off a hip and knee replacement for decades because I had everything so strong. And so, when you look at a squat, it's probably if I had to pick one exercise and only one exercise for someone to do, it would be a squat. Because leg strength is going to be your single most important thing as we age, being able to get up a flight of stairs, get up off the couch. And when you're doing a squat, you're working your core, you're working your back muscles, you're working your glutes, you're working your quads. Everything has to move together, and you're stressing your spine. So it's great for osteoporosis. I also love, like you mentioned, a deadlift, and they're so hard, single leg Romanian deadlifts. Those are fantastic because once you've done the basics of these types of exercises like push-ups and overhead presses and squats, once you get foundational and you start to build and start to be able to lift more weight, then I like you to start to move in all the different planes. You're doing rotational work, side work, front work, back work, and you start to work in balance and you start to work in speed, right? But you got to get the foundation first because that's going to help you avoid getting injured both at the gym and in life.
Those are fantastic tips. And I want to get into just a little bit as to how many times per week, what do the splits look like? But before we do, one of the biggest rebuttals I always got helping clients with exercise was, well, I can't do squats because I have bad knees, or I can't do squats because, and just like you said yourself, you were able to actually hold off knee replacement surgery because you did do squats, deadlifts, step ups, lunges, et cetera, to be able to keep all those muscles and everything strong. So I always have my tips, but I want to hear yours as to what to do if a client does have knee pain when they squat.
So the issue is they're getting in and out of chairs, which is they're squatting. Mm-hmm. So you really look at it and go, but you're having to do this movement all the time.
Yes.
So ideally, we want to get you to a point you're able to do this. Now, some of the ways that I ease people into this, first of all, I love higher chair squats, air squats to start with, where we really work on form. I will use a big ball and put it behind their back and do a ball wall squat to start with some isometric holds at the bottom so that they can really start to strengthen the quads. I believe that a lot of the reason we have the issue with knee pain is not because we have knee problems, it's because we have weak quads. Right. So
yeah, I don't disagree. Weak quads, weak hamstrings, weak glutes.
Yeah, we can't if you have an ACL injury, which is what I had, I have strengthened my hamstrings so much to help account for that. But I also really worked what's called the vastus group surrounding your knee, doing different types of small range of motion movements. And then also using a piece of equipment called an exciser, which is a mini stepper, to do a closed chain, small movement stepping to really strengthen right around the knees. Because, here I am, I was bone on bone, blew out my knee at 17, blew it out again at 21, had my meniscus taken out, and then had my ACL repaired, blew that out, had it done again, blew it out again, right? And they're like, oh, you're going to need a knee replacement. But don't do it now because we'll have to do it again. I'm like, and that was when I was, I think, 26 or something. I finally had a knee replacement at 52. And I remember when I walked in, they go, we don't even know how you're walking. And the reason I finally went and got the knee replacement, and I should have done it a lot earlier, but was because it messed up my other hip and messed up my other knee because of my gait change.
Yes.
But the way I was able to maintain it for so long, literally bone on bone, was because I was so active. I kept everything so strong so that I wasn't relying on the joint stability, the joint integrity. I was using my muscles to do that for me. And so the stronger that you can be, and I found the only time it hurt was when I wasn't doing things. And also when I was pregnant, you add 50 pounds into the mix. That was not a good thing for it. But other than that, keeping it active and my nutrition, really dialing in anti-inflammatory foods, lots of antioxidant-rich veggies and fruits, and keeping everything strong made all of the different. So again, I would really emphasize, we look at these things and think why we couldn't do them. I worked in physical therapy for years, and I was like, oh, no, that's the reason you need to do this. We just start easy and build from it, and you're going to be blown away as to what you can do.
I think those are great tips. And believe it or not, just like you said, the more you start to use those muscles, the less pain there is. And you're bringing circulation, you're bringing anti-inflammatories to that area. So that's fantastic. Would love now to get into a little bit. So we've got our walking, increasing the intensity a little bit. We're moving on to resistance training, whether it's starting to use your body weight first and then move into bands and cables and different types of weights. How many times a week do we need, though? What's the minimum? And then is there a maximum, especially as we get older?
There's always a minimum and a maximum, no matter what age you are. And it's interesting, what they're finding with muscle is we can build the same at 80 as we could at 40. So nothing really changes. And rest is always important. Rest is where you rebuild. That's that's the mission critical. So too much is not going to help you. Generally, what I like to look at, and there's so much on this right now, and I think we need to give people specifics, because saying, oh, you can choose any of these things, some people go, I'm confused, I do nothing. So to me, I remember ACSM telling us way back when that if you could do 3 times a week, 3 exercises, 1 set each, and build. And maybe if you're brand new, that could be the case. But as you improve, it gets harder to build muscle. So here's what I tell people. To me, the bare minimum is to do 2 exercise sessions a week for each of those body parts I talked about. Now, I talked about upper body pushing, upper body pulling, hips and thigh. I did not talk about core, because in my world, if we are doing push-ups and we are doing bent over rows and we are doing squats, you better be using your core. And so just like I don't spend any time doing bicep or tricep work, which people always say, how'd you get your arms? You must do a lot of biceps. I never do them. I do pull-ups and push-ups and dips. I like to do multi-joint functional exercises that are going to recruit a lot more muscles and have bigger metabolic cost. So what I would say is the bare minimum is 2 days a week, 2 different exercises per body group, body part, and at least 2 sets after a warm-up set. Now, here's the cool thing with building muscle, and I've got to distinguish between building muscle, building strength, and building power, because they're actually different. As we age, the statistics are starting around age 30, we start to lose 3 to 8% of our muscle a decade. It's like up to 1% as you start to hit 40. But that's not the problem. It's really the bigger problem of you lose 2 to 4% of your strength and 4 to 6% and 6 to 8% of your power. And apparently at the age of 60, this can start to double. None of this has to happen. That's the cool thing. None of it has to happen. And if it's already started happening for you, you notice that you're trying to unscrew a lid and you're like, holy smokes, I can't open this like I used to. Don't worry, you can get it back. That's what's awesome too. So you want to do, the hypertrophy range is anywhere from 6 repetitions all the way up to 30. And doing multiple sets of these, taking about, 2 minutes in between. And you like to work in different rep ranges because it taxes your body differently. However, if you really want to build strength, it's the lower end. And it's really probably more like, 3 to 6 reps. And if you want to build power, you go fast. So here's how I teach people to do this. Start out 2 days a week, 2 exercises per body part, and really using your body. This should, first time you do it, it's basically body weight, light weights. Then you start to add a little bit of weight, and you want to get to within the first 4 to 8 weeks to the point where when you get to that, you're doing those 2 harder sets, you feel like at the end of the set, you could maybe eke out 1 or 2 more. That's called reps in reserve. And I find it's easiest for people to work somewhere in the 8 to 12 to 15 reps. If you're one of those people that's scared of weights, then you go longer, right? Because you still get the same effect by going longer and a little lighter. Or you can, if you're short on time, go heavier, right? But that's the first 8 weeks. Better if you do it 3 times a week with, 48 hours rest in between. And better if after a couple weeks you take it up to 3 sets for each of those body parts. And then even better than that would go to 3 exercises per body part. But minimum would be 2 times 2, right? And
does that look like about 10 different sets then? Are we talking about like 5 different exercises times 2 sets to start? And then
so
working
what's
up?
nice is, to start 2 times 2 would be 2 days a week, 2 exercises per body part, 3 body parts. So that's, not a whole lot of work that you really had to do there, right?
Sure.
But the goal really is to hit more like each body part, you're doing 3 sets, 3 body parts. So you're doing about 10, 9, 10 sets per body part, because you also have your warm-up sets. So 9 sets per body part, 3 different body parts. So you could theoretically divide this any way you want to. You could go upper body pushing and pulling one day, hips and thighs the next, however you want to do it. I really love this concept of exercise snacks. Kind of microdosing exercise for the people that say, I don't have time. I go, well, just decide today you're going to do a little push and pull circuit. What would happen if you just went and did that tomorrow? You do a little hip and thigh circuit, right? And they take 15 minutes. It's just more the consistency over time and the volume within the exercise. For building muscle, volume is key. But then once you've gotten a foundation, you really want to add in what's called high velocity resistance training. That means going a little heavier and going a little faster. Because again, what we lose as we age is that speed. All resistance training is going to be fast twitch, but we really want to focus on how do we get things like speed back in. It turns out age 30, only 1% of us will ever start to sprint again. Like we just stop doing the fast moves.
Yes. How do you feel about doing box jumps or squat jumps or sprinting? Where is that in your program? Are you working up to that after resistance training to avoid injuries? Okay.
That comes next. So I love all that stuff. I hate all that stuff.
Right, exactly. Most of us do, yes.
I'll share my perfect stuff. There is, okay, you're moving more. And that now what I've raised my floor up, that my floor is 12,000 steps a day. So you're doing that. Then you're doing your resistance training. You're monitoring all of this with a bioimpedance scale so that you can see this happening, because, putting on muscles like watching grass grow, you'll see your strength improve before you'll see your muscle mass increase. People are so afraid of putting on muscle. And I'm like, you'll be lucky if you can put on 1 to 2 pounds of muscle in a month. So like, this isn't something that you wake up one morning and go, what the heck happened? How did my biceps get so big? Has never happened ever, right? So you're tracking with the bioimpedance scale, hopefully doing a DEXA scan every 6 months, but you're seeing yourself get stronger. When you've laid that foundation and now you're able to start pushing the weight and putting in that high velocity resistance training, the next thing I want to add in is I want to get you adding in some high intensity interval training into the mix. And what I love about that is you can do HIIT intervals in a variety of ways. You can do it using box jumps. That also can be a warm up for the rest of your exercises. You can do, skater jumps. You can do sprinting on the treadmill. So I've incorporated in things like, burpees, mountain climbers, little treadmill sprints, box jumps, wood chops, medicine ball throws, which I think medicine ball throws are one of the greatest things ever. These weighted ball throws, all this stuff that you can do that starts putting the power in and that makes you have to work in different planes. And you mentioned that earlier. It's like we want to both incorporate things like balance, but we also want to avoid, and this was one of the traps I found myself getting into at the gym, is I was moving all in like this frontal plane. And I went, I got to start rotating. I got to start moving to the side. It was when I started going back to yoga, which I think adding in a yoga class a week is a great thing to do to work through those full ranges of motion, add in the balance, add in the stability, add in all of the isometrics. I realized that I've been really sticking in one plane. So we need to also add in rotation, side movements, forward movements into the mix. And so that all starts to come after you've got that foundation.
That's excellent. And so would you say, because it sounds like a lot, but would you say in 30 minutes a day, you could fit in everything that you need? That includes your well, not your walking. Your walking, I consider just part of being alive.
Yeah.
That's your human movement.
It's
So
like
we got to get that in.
flossing. Your
That's
walking
right.
is your flossing.
Walking is flossing. I like that. And also the post-dinner one is a great tip because it doesn't need to be an hour and a half all at one time. It can be 20, 30 minutes walking the dog, 20 minutes after dinner. It helps with glucose levels. So all of these are great. They add up if you're walking or exercising, your steps count during that. So it kind of is all included. But the weight training, can you accomplish that in 30 minutes?
You know what? Here's what I look at. Let's figure out how much time you have and then let's use it effectively. And so the answer is yes. And I always find that the less time you have, it seems like the more you get done, right?
That's
because
true.
let's say that you had 30 minutes. I would be doing push and pull supersets.
That's right. Yeah.
So let's look at the time you have and let's look at what needs to happen. And again, I'm glad you said it. Walking to me is part of life. This is activity living, activities of daily living. You just need to be moving more and tracking that and figure out how to put it in as you're doing the other stuff.
But people could set up maybe a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 30 minutes. And that would be a great starting point to
totally great. Okay. Like here's what I don't want people to go. I don't have 30 minutes, so I'm not going to do it. Hey, find 10 minutes. Sure. Find whatever you can start with. It's better than what you weren't doing. It's like, let's start somewhere. And, there was a study done. I remember reading this in grad school. And at the time, everything then, Stephen, it drove me nuts was if you don't have at least 30 minutes to exercise, don't start because you need to be in your fat burning zone. Remember all that stuff?
Yeah, I do. You're right.
And it was ridiculous. And you need to at least an hour and blah, blah, blah. So people were like, okay, I'm not going to do it. So they did a study where they looked at people they were told to do 10 minutes 3 times a day versus 30 minutes a day. And guess what? Guess who got the better results? The 10 minutes 3 times a day. Now, the whole reason was, per the study, was, well, the people who couldn't do 30 minutes did nothing, and at least the 10-minuters did something. But I posit that there was another piece to it of when you've got 10 minutes, you really push it, right? So I think what you do, again, if you step into this with build the steps, add the intensity, and then let's start the resistance training. And maybe you have to do the resistance training 10 minutes every day. And you say, today's push, tomorrow's pull, the next day's hips and thighs. Great. Do what works. Get it in. Start moving. Because I bet as you start to do that, I always find I had a great mentor early on. He goes, if you don't have time, make time. And I
agree with that. Yeah, you have to. Right. You have to.
I think people are saying I don't have time because they don't want to do it. And time is the number one objection. But as you start to do it and go, it's like, oh, I feel better. Boy, you start to find a little more time. So
completely agree. Resetting those priorities. Because as we know, everybody makes it a priority. Health is always a priority when you lose it. But instead of losing it in the first place, why don't we do a little bit each and every day? Now, I've got a question for you because I know that you are deep into the healthy biohacking and healthy anti-aging. So we're talking about exercising. We're talking about getting started with the walking, the intensity, the resistance training, maybe then some HIIT-based training, which I am completely on board with. But there's also all of this sauna, cold plunge, PMF, red light, and recovery. Do you put the exercise first before that, or do you have people start to get into the recovery rejuvenation before the exercise?
So I have 3 pillars in this powerful aging program. And with the underlying piece of this, like the foundation is your mindset. The foundation is the mindset because the prevailing mindset out there is, oh, you're just getting older. You aren't going to be able to do as much, all that blah, 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 right? So the first mindset has to be get excited about this, decide you're going to be in the best shape of your life, set your new goals for where you want to be at 60, 70, 80, how you want to live your life, be there, put yourself there, right? Future self. Then, we've got the nutrition piece of things, we've got the exercise piece of things, and we've got the recovery piece of things. One's not more important than the other. It's like as an exercise physiologist, I'll say exercise. However, exercise without recovery is just going to break you down. And, and exercise without the diet to support it, it's not going to help you build, and then, recovery, but having nothing to recover from is going to be a problem. So we need them all. And the recovery piece of it, I feel like, is one that we really tend to miss. You know, there's interesting research on sauna helping with muscle protein synthesis. So the big thing with recovery is knowing when to do things. And I say that because the one that you have to really watch is cold therapy. Now, I prefer to call these things recovery rather than biohacks. And we have a room in our house that's our recovery room. And we have a big sunlight and sauna. So we have our infrared sauna, and we'll do that one in the evening. And then we have one of those fast heat up saunas next to a cold plunge. And so we'll do that in the morning before going to the gym. Mm-hmm. Because if you do cold plunge after the gym, you're going to blunt that response. You have this inflammatory response post workout that you need to have. You don't want to blunt it because you'll blunt, some of the muscle protein synthesis. So I do that 3 days a week, 4 days a week, pre-workout is where I put that in. And then I also do red light. And I think red light you could do at any point. So
yeah, that's great. Well, the cold plunge can certainly act as your pre-workout. That's for sure, right? That's yes. Instead of your caffeinated beverage, you could do the cold plunge. But I agree. I mean, I definitely think that people need to have something to recover from. Now, aging, we want to be working on these things for rejuvenation. And I do think that sauna can be a standalone. So sauna in and of itself gives you and can give you a little bit of the zone 2-based benefits. Yep. It helps with circulation. It helps with balancing healthy levels of inflammation, heat shock proteins, et cetera. So that's fantastic. But if someone's saying, should I skip my workout to get in my PMF or my cold plunge or my red light? For me, I want them to use those modalities to recover from their hard workout or their workout that pushes themselves. When I say a hard workout, I just mean hard relative to you. Whatever is hard for you or challenges you just a little bit more is what I'm looking for you to do. Just like you said, you start at 2 sets. And for a lot of people, I only have them start at 1 set just to be like, because I don't want them too sore the next week. So it's like, it depends on where you're coming into this equation. But I can think of like my parents starting to work out. They do 2 sets times 5 different exercises. And they're like, I've never been so sore. And so, we're just easing everybody depending on where they're at. But I also do think that people will use the sauna or the PMF or the red light as almost like a reward for their workout. Because they like doing those things. So I do enjoy having those at the end for people to say, all right, I earned my sauna or I earned whatever it is.
I love you thinking about it that way. And in our resistance training cheat sheet, step 1 is go through the movement. Mm-hmm. Let's go through the movement. I'll tell you what, Stephen, when I first started learning all of this, I was in grad school and I had a friend and she was 20 years older than me. So she was 40, and I took her to the gym. Spent 3 hours with her there. I showed her everything I'd learned. We took her through everything, and she was in bed for a week. She threw her back out. I was like, I learned in real time why not to do that. And you never want to, when I'm getting someone into all of this, it's always better to start with less and listen to what your body says. Because it's easy to add, but if you've gone overboard, then you're like, then you're like, they're like, I'm out.
100%. I make the same mistake myself still all the time, meaning like, I was like, all right, I'm going to start training for this. And I have the time to train for it. It's not like I'm going to the Olympics, but yet I just dive in head over heels and I still make the same mistake. So it's like, you're excited to get started, but you want to keep in mind, if we are thinking about living to 100 and beyond, we have time. So let's start with the lowest thing that we could do. Oh, that wasn't so bad. The next time we do a little bit more and we start to build off of that. So I think that that's great. Now, we didn't talk about it, but is there an upper limit? Would you say, especially as you get older, that maybe 6 days a week of training, 7 days a week of training is too much, or is it just how much can you recover from? So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
I think it's the type of training you're doing. And that's where you want to be doing different things, different rep ranges, different types of exercise. So like today I did yoga and I'll do all my movement and I'm going to do some little exercise snacks of doing some like HIIT, sprint and exerciser stuff. Yesterday I did a really heavy leg workout, like super duper heavy. So I'm always rotating things around. Now, if I was doing super heavy weights every single day, that's problematic. But let's say, you're mixing things up. One day, maybe you're doing more, cardio HIIT. The next day you're doing resistance training. The next day you're going to do yoga and a walk and a weighted rucking vest walk. You just mix these things up and add in the recovery and the right nutrition. And you listen to your body. And I think one of the great tools is we used to watch our heart rate and go, oh, if your resting heart rate's up, you're overtraining a bit, back off. Now we can look at your HRV.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a minute. So I love looking at heart rate variability. How do you use it with your clients and just, teaching your coaches, et cetera?
So for HRV, it's funny. I was first monitoring off my watch and my ring, and I'm like, oh my gosh, my HRV stinks. What the heck? And then I was talking to Molly Maloof, and she goes, that's too far away from your heart. And I'm like,
completely agree. Yes.
That's why I was like going, how is my HRV so bad? And blah, blah, blah. And even I went to Dr. Joe Dispenza, I'd be there for a week, and I'm like, it's still not that good. Like, what is going on? Then I put it on. Then I did a chest strap, a polar strap, and I went, oh.
Did the same thing. I completely agree with you. Yes.
But here's the thing. It's just like bioimpedance. A bioimpedance body composition scale is not going to be accurate like a DEXA, but it's going to give you the relative change. So if you're monitoring your HRV on your Oura ring, it's not going to give you the levels that you get if you did a chest strap, but it will give you the relative difference. And all of a sudden, if you see that your HRV has decreased, by 20-30%, probably a day for a walk, maybe an easy yoga class, go get a massage. So you can use your HRV to see how well you're recovering. And that's where I like to use it. I think it's absolutely fantastic. You can also use grip strength. So if you have a hand grip dynamometer and you see that your hand grip has gone down by like 20%, back off. You need a break.
Those are good tips. Yeah, for sure. I love that. And the Oura Ring, Whoop Strap, whatever your favorite one is, I use the Oura Ring, but the software is always improving. They have a new data set that just came out this last week. And I'm pretty sure it's across everyone. It's not just like for a certain subset. And they're actually showing you your resilience at a higher level. So they're showing you your output and your recovery. And they have 4 different ranges, and exceptional would be the top range. And so your job is not to have an easy life. It's actually to push yourself, but then see, is your body responding? Is your heart rate dropping within the first 4 hours or so of sleep? Is your body temperature coming down at night? Is your heart rate variability stable or increasing a little bit? So I truly love biometrics. I think that, as you were saying, don't compare it to anybody else either. Meaning, like, I've talked with all the top experts on heart rate variability, and it is unique. Some people never had a heart rate variability of 100 in their life, whereas others genetically had a higher heart rate variability. But if we know our baseline is, let's just say, a 30 for an individual, well, if you're at a 22, something's off. Like, your body is more stressed. But if it's a 36, you're on the uptrend. You don't need it to be 55 or 85. There's no specific one. Now, I will say, if you start to see it in the low teens and single digits, there is an issue. Yikes. There is chronic inflammation. There is something really weighing on the body, and we want to have that checked for sure.
But it's also great because you get what your norm is. Mm-hmm. You do the things that can optimize it. You establish your new norm. And then if it dumps, you're like, okay, time to go see Dr. Cabral.
Yes, exactly. For sure. We'll look deep into that, of course, with all the at-home labs, but there's something that you are absolutely an expert in and been talking about this for over a decade, and it's really helping women, menopause. So let's call it perimenopause, postmenopause, being able to still weight train, eat right, be able to live their best life, have energy, good mood, and beyond. And I would love to hear tips as to, do any of the advice you gave here today change for women past 40? And it doesn't have to be 40. It could be 48, it could be 37, but within the menopause, hormones are changing range. Any caveats that we should know about?
Your margin for error is like gone down. I think that's the biggest thing. Like,
let's talk about that for sure.
Right. The stuff you could get away with in your 20s and 30s, maybe staying out late, it's over. You can't pull that stuff off anymore. And when estrogen starts to dump, you do have, and I know there's all this controversy over it, because there was a study done that showed that metabolism doesn't really start to slow till age 60. Mm-hmm. But then there's also research showing that when estrogen decreases, your metabolism decreases somewhere around 200 calories. every single woman I know going through menopause is left unchecked, starts to gain weight and around their midsection. We start to produce more estrogen through our abdominal fat cells, through our adrenals. So the big thing I say with people as they're going into menopause, if I could catch someone at the perfect time, I'd catch them around 35. We'd optimize adrenal health. We'd really focus on resilience and making sure that you really can manage stress well before this all happens, because that's what you have to rely on. And then the other piece of this is you need to work with your doctor on if you are doing hormone replacement therapy or using other things in place of hormone replacement therapy. Labs will only give you the snapshot, and you really have to work with your doctor alongside labs to figure out what you need. Having said that, you want to make sure that your diet, lifestyle are absolutely dialed in. So whatever else you need to do, you can use the minimum effective dose of, right? That you don't have to rely on hormones for things that you should have been able to do with your diet and lifestyle. So those are the big things with this. Is I truly believe that you working with a great doctor can basically get through this fairly easily. I know I did, and all my friends are functional medicine docs. So I was absolutely dialed in all the way through and came through it very easily. And even though it was one of the most stressful times in my life. And then when you get to the other side, it's smooth sailing. You'll be like, I wish I could have been on this other side from the time I was 15, 16, because it gets very, very easy, right?
Yeah.
But you do have to focus on, making sure all of your supplementation is optimized. I think the single most, beyond vitamin D and fish oil and magnesium, I think the single most important supplement for menopausal women is creatine.
Talk about that for a minute. I'd love to hear why you believe that.
Yes. And there's really cool research coming out now on creatine. First of all, women have less tissue stores of creatine than men, 70 to 80%. Women eat less protein, especially less animal protein. And that's where if you are going to get it, our body's going to manufacture a little each day, like a gram. We have less tissue stores, then we're eating less protein, especially less animal protein. So we're not going to get what we need. Creatine not only helps us work out harder because it helps us with our creatine phosphate system, that's the power moves, but also creatine helps with a great study on menopausal women and depression, helping with mood and cognition, helping with bone mineral density, helping with skin. So helping you recover from exercise, helping with energy. So you look at all of these things, and it tends to be all the things that we start to suffer as we're going through menopause, creatine helps with, and we tend to be low in it. And it's super well studied and very inexpensive. I have people titrate it up because women are so afraid of getting big. And I'm like, this is why I want you to do body composition testing where you're monitoring total body water. Because what you'll see with creatine is your total body water may increase a little bit because you've got a little bit more muscle water in your muscles. And that's a good thing, what we want. But if you bring it up slowly, start with a gram, then add another gram, then add another gram, get yourself somewhere between 3 to 5 grams a day, maybe do it in divided doses. You likely won't really see that. And if you do see any of it, you'll see that it's actually improving your muscle water content, which is good, but you'll notice how much better you feel. And that's the more important thing.
That's great. A great tip. You mentioned one other thing that I would love to start to close with, and that was adrenal health, because that is something that's near and dear to my heart, having suffered from Addison's disease and understanding that stress itself is one of the main causes of aging. It just ages us to a far greater degree. It can imbalance our hormones. It can dysregulate our blood sugar, to basically dissolve our sleep into less than an hour of deep sleep a night. So if you could share some of the things that you may have done or that you've seen work with yourself and your colleagues as to how to improve adrenal health, that would be tremendous.
Well, I know you do it. I believe you do adrenal testing, right?
We do, yes.
Big fan of adrenal testing. I'll tell you a story. I, had very stressful time with my kids growing up. One of my sons has had a lot of different health issues. And one of the lab directors was like, you are taking an adrenal test. And I was like kind of kicking and screaming, no, I'm not. I'm great, and I sure enough had massive adrenal issues. And I love testing because people will pay attention. HRV is another great one. And you can then take your adrenal test and HRV and kind of put them together. But that's a great place to start to kind of see where things are. When you look at this, as we start, first of all, there's all this conversation and chatter out there about being careful with exercise because it raises cortisol. And we have to address that because it kind of drives me nuts. Sure, if you are a long distance runner, I would argue that that's not the place you want to really be spending your time because it's much more catabolic, raises stress hormones. But you want exercise to raise stress hormones because it will raise stress hormones and lower them and teach your body how to handle stress better and become more resilient and learn how to do hard things and recover from them.
Yes.
You want adrenal glands that work well, that your cortisol comes up in the morning, comes down later throughout the day so you can prepare for sleep. But excess cortisol over time is going to become not enough cortisol because you put on your foot on the gas on the adrenal glands too much. And while you're in that excess state, by the way, I never had people when I was working one-on-one with people come in during the excess state, ever. Like
Probably
they're
true.
like, yee-hoo, yes. I'm getting so much done. Now, what they started to notice during the excess state is they had anxiety. They started to have gut issues. They started to gain belly fat. They started to crave sugar. They couldn't sleep. So as this, and then their energy started to drop as the cortisol came down. But if you start to enter that, you get into that stage where now you've got leaky gut, belly fat, you're catabolic, you're having trouble building muscle. Now you've disrupted your thyroid function, right? All this stuff, you're starting to become insulin resistant. Your fasting blood sugar is elevated. You've really created a mess. And that mess, if you haven't fixed it, if you start to go into menopause, just compounds. That's when you really have trouble with perimenopause, is when your adrenals aren't working well. So, again, if I could think of one thing to help women as we start to move into the perimenopause phase, that premenopause phase, it's all about your adrenals. And you really won't know where you're at until you test. You might think you're doing fine. So testing is so super important. And I know this isn't a test. I'm so glad that you do this because it's like,
you're
to me,
speaking
these
my
are
language.
they should be standard, like vitamin D testing, cortisol, these should be standard of care because if you improve your adrenal health, everything improves.
That's right.
And if your adrenals are trashed, you can't get past that. You have to go there and fix that. So it's really foundational to everything else.
It is amazing that, doctors, specialists, endocrinologists are still treating the thyroid without even looking at the adrenals. It continues to blow my mind, but that's why luckily we have you, we have got your books, your podcast, your knowledge. I appreciate you joining me here today. I would love to give you the final word because you have you've got some big news coming over the next year. I won't give that all away, but you do have something for my audience. And I thought that this was worth noting. So if you want to share that right now, I'd love to hear that.
Cool. Yes. So 2 things that will be helpful. One is our Eat Protein First challenge. And that is what I always like to focus on. What are simple wins? Like just making sure that you are optimizing your diet, you're eating the right amount for you so that you can build muscle, so that you've got that thermic effect. And that you've also, we also talk about the rest of the plate, non-starchy vegetables, fruit, all of that. But a simple thing where you're tracking your food, doing a macro audit, and then improving, upgrading your plate. And then the other side, and that's at jjvirgin.com/protein first. The other one is on my YouTube channel. I did do a how to get started on a resistance training routine with a cheat sheet. So those are simple things to get started with. The biggest takeaway being, again, aging's a privilege. Like we want to do this. The alternative is, we're not here. But aging powerfully is absolutely a choice, and it's a choice you make every single day. And it first comes with mindset, and then it is those 3 pillars of what you eat, how you move, and how you recover. And they all need to be dialed in.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us here today. I'm going to link up all of those in the show notes here today. But once again, we appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning into today's show. Before you go, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I want to make sure that you're getting our daily content, not missing out on anything functional medicine, wellness, weight gain, weight loss, anti-aging, living longer, stronger, and all of the most cutting-edge research. And if there's any topics you want to hear, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Take care.